You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Shlomit, welcome to the Modern People Leader. So good to have
Thank you. Yeah, great being here today.
And you're joining us from Amsterdam. Is that right?
Correct.
Which is great. One of our 2025 goals is to expand our Europe, EU presence. I was going to say EMEA, but now people say EU. So sorry, I stumbled over my words, but very excited to have you. It's the same. And I'm very excited to have you on. We have a lot of interesting things that we want to talk about with you. Before we get into that, though, we have a tradition on the show. We call it Good News Stories. We all share a personal or work-related story from the past week, maybe 2 weeks, just to kick things off with a little positivity, maybe a little gratitude. And we prefer for our guests to go first. But if you need time, we can fill in some time for you. But we prefer...
Okay, no, that's a nice challenge. Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I love the gratitude angle. We actually start every team meeting with a gratitude exercise. So the first thing that we do in the first 10 minutes of our team meetings is what are we grateful for from the last week? And it can be something related to work. It can be a gratitude towards a colleague. It could be also something related to personal life if people want to share. Gratitude definitely shifts our mindset towards the good and paying attention to what is good. So from the last 2 weeks, I'm going to choose being grateful for our company kickoff. So we had a company kickoff 2 weeks ago. We brought the entire Mironeers, the entire organization together for 3 days of connection, of inspiration, of just spending time with each other, seeking clarity, getting clarity, and having also a lot of fun. So I'm extremely grateful for this event. And also I'm extremely grateful for the people who made it happen. So the teams who worked on it, which very much cross-functional team, who brought all of it together in a very short period of time. And that has been an awesome experience. So extremely grateful for the event itself and all the energy that it brought, and also for the people that have been working on it.
Love that. I'll go next. I cannot compete with that. Mine is very basic. I had a dreaded check engine light came on in my car. I drive a Mini Cooper, and the check engine came on last weekend, and turns out I had some sort of leak. And when it's engine related, I was like fearful. Oh my God, like this is just gonna be terrible. It wasn't great, but it's fixed, and it wasn't. I'm not going to go broke over this engine fix. So I'm going to take that good news today.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, that is good news. You need your car. I'm going to go work related. So next week is MPL Live Boston. So this will be our second MPL Live event, which is, they're in-person events, typically between like 70 and 100 people. And whenever you throw an event like this, there are like 100 to 200 little details that go into it. And it's like 3 or 4 months of planning, sometimes even longer. And so I think we started planning this in November or like early December. And to have it finally be here feels like a huge weight off my shoulders, at least. I always just want to make sure that all the details are ironed out. We have a location, people buy tickets, we have sponsors, people enjoy it. And so far, so good. We're in a really good place. And so now that like all the things have happened, I'm feeling really good about it. And now is the fun part, like actually attending the event, doing the live podcast. And so I'm excited for that.
And we sold record tickets.
That's
so
true.
That we smashed our record. I think we sold 70 tickets for the MPL Live Austin event. For Boston, I think we're at like 84 tickets sold.
Something like that,
we're super excited about that. So San Francisco's up next. So y'all will be hearing more and more about that coming soon.
Yeah.
Nice. Good luck.
And so, Shlomit, I really enjoyed your career story in our prep call. I think the combination of the different countries that you've lived in and worked in and the different industries that you've been a part of, I think this is like your first founder led company that you've worked for, and that was a big reason that you wanted to join. So I want to hear the full story. Give us the Shlomit story and how that landed you, where you're at as chief people officer at Miro. I saw this stat the other day. 71% of teams still aren't using AI to manage or discover information at their company. Like, that blew me away the first time that I read that. That means that critical insights are slipping through the cracks and teams are wasting time reinventing the wheel. That's why on March 12th, Atlassian is hosting a fireside chat with best-selling author and teamwork expert Liz Foslin and Forrester analyst Julie Moore. They're going to break down how AI is transforming knowledge management. They're going to cover why AI-powered enterprise search is the key to unlocking efficiency, how conversational AI is democratizing knowledge across teams, and why automating knowledge sharing helps your team work smarter. So if any of this sounds familiar, highly recommend you attend their webinar. Go save your spot now. Like I said, it's on March 12th. You can find the link in the show notes. Go save your spot before you forget.
Okay, great. I like the Shlomit story angle. So I started my career, that was like 24 years already ago at IBM. And I always say that IBM is the best school and the best university that I could ask for. And with IBM, I spent my time in several countries. So I started my career in EMEA Shared Services, which was back then located in the UK. Then I moved into people partnership roles. First, I spent some time in Paris supporting the EMEA software organization. And then later, I moved to Madrid, also for a people partnership role. And then, and I remember those was the years of quite a huge development in what was used to be called the BRIC countries, if anyone remembers that time. Yeah, okay, good. And there was the effort to send top talents to those BRIC countries to further help with growth and development. And I was offered the very, I would say, interesting and quite adventurous proposition to move to Moscow. That was 2007. And pretty much 5 months after moving with IBM to Moscow, I got an opportunity with SAP to lead the region as an HR director, what used to be called the CIS region. So it included all the Russian speaking, I would say, countries. And those were years of hyper growth, a lot of movement, a lot of things happening, a lot of transformation. So quite a fun time in terms of the number of things that we needed to do and also the speed of things, which, also is always exciting in the HR space because you need to grow and it's always fun to work on growth and development. So I spent 5.5 years with SAP. At some point, I was also leading EMEA emerging markets. So that included the CIS region that I was already leading, but then also Africa, Middle East, and Eastern Europe. And then I was almost about to move on inside SAP and move to the headquarters, which was back then in Germany. And then came a very, I would say, even more adventurous proposition and opportunity to lead the people function, the people area for the largest privately owned bank in Russia, Alpha Bank, which already back then, and I'm talking about 2012, was very advanced from a technological point of view, from a digital perspective, and at the same time still needed to go through a lot of transformation and a lot of change. And I remember, when I first got the call about Alpha Bank, I was like, me, bank, Russian organization, after spending 11 years in international companies, in global companies, knowing that, I'm part of international teams, even though running different regions and different countries. But I was very, very attracted to the challenge So I definitely, the more I had conversations, I saw it as a big opportunity, a big learning opportunity. Of course, coming with some degree of risk, as the organization was already at that time quite big, 18,000 employees with quite a big transformation agenda. But I was very impressed with the people that I met, with the newly appointed CEO, with the board, with the shareholders, and I decided to go for it. And I spent 6.5 years with Alpha, and that was one of the best times in my life. I remember that still until today with very warm memories. In 2018, I left Alpha Bank, and at that time it was a bit of a crossroad, and I felt that after spending obviously 11 years in global companies and then doing this great adventure with Alpha, that I want to go back to the international arena, into more the multicultural world. And by the way, I have to say, working in both international and monoculture environment, it's much more challenging to be from one culture to work in a different monoculture. That's what I learned. So actually working in the international environment is easier. This is one of the things that I learned also on myself. So you really, I think you get a lot of development, especially when it comes to more resilience and flexibility and growth mindset, when you are from one culture having to adapt in a different culture, and also learning the language to operate on a daily basis. So I had a bit of this crossroad. And then at the same time, I got the opportunity to join a joint venture with a company called Yandex, which is quite known in Russia, because Yandex used to be the Russian Google, the Russian Amazon, the Russian Netflix, the Russian Spotify, a super app that started with search capabilities, but then went into other areas. And at that time, they built a joint venture with the largest bank in Russia for an e-commerce company. And I thought that that's quite an interesting experience, both on getting a glimpse of what it is to work pretty much for a startup, although the joint venture was built on the technology and data capabilities of Yandex. A lot of things had to be built from scratch, especially everything that had to do with commercial capabilities, commerce capabilities. So bringing the technology with commercial skills, and also combining the world of online and offline. So I took this opportunity, and in a very short period of time, we were able to build pretty much things from scratch. I'm talking about warehouses, hiring commercial teams, building the HR organization. And, it's like when I was thinking about what I want to do next, it's like one of the things which I always say, you put out there to the universe, I want to go back to the international arena, but you don't know how it's going to happen. And then 6 months in, when I was at Yandex Market, I got the phone call from OLX, which is part of Prosus Naspers group, with the offer to lead the people organization for, back then it was OLX Markets, and then later I took OLX Group, and to move to the Netherlands, which again, it was a great calling and an opportunity to go back to the global arena, to the international arena. And so in the summer of 2019, we moved over from Moscow to the Netherlands. And since then, I'm here in the Netherlands. I joined OLX. And actually, back then I was summer of 2019, things happened so quickly. I felt like I was almost pulled and moved. Some forces pulled me out, very quickly to move here and take this opportunity. And then, 6 months later, I started COVID and everything. So in a way, it turned out to be the best timing. And sometimes you don't know in life, things happen, it's why it happens this way. And then you connect the dot looking backwards, someone smart said already. So definitely, it felt like there was a force that pulled me to this opportunity, and that was absolutely also the right timing. I joined OLX. I spent almost 5 years with OLX. OLX started as classifieds business. Those were the COVID years when we were actually scaling OLX. And that has been an incredible journey. I mean, I remember at some point we scaled from 3,000 people to 11,000, mostly through organic growth. I mean, we had also some non-organic growth, some acquisitions, but we needed to hire like crazy. That was particularly in 2020, 2021. There was a lot of demand and growing demand to secondhand trade. There's been a lot of growth, a lot of scaling, obviously supporting the organization throughout COVID in 30 markets, which brought a lot of challenges with it. At some point also, we were affected by the Russia-Ukraine war because we had a company in Russia and in Ukraine. And at a later stage, the Russia operation was decoupled. And that also brought new challenges, obviously, to our work dealing with people's safety, I would say, first and foremost. And then also bringing operations back on track. And then at a later stage, we also divested from some of the investment and some of the markets. So you can say that at the time that I was at OLX, I saw it all. I saw scale, I saw growth, I saw investments, I saw acquisitions, I saw divestments, I saw COVID, I saw wars, it's like everything. It was a very enriching and interesting experience. And last year, almost, or I'd say a year ago, I joined Miro. Miro is purely digital business. It's a SaaS organization, SaaS company, which started as a whiteboard 13 years ago or so, 14 years ago. Later became a visual collaboration. And actually, the story of Miro is fascinating because there's been a lot of visual collaborations out there, but Miro is the one that excelled, or I think of being one of the most successful ones during COVID. There was a very strong product market fit. And overnight, Miro became very successful or huge success with millions and millions of users across the globe. I mean, today we have something like 90 million users that are collaborating and building on the Miro platform. And in the past year, we've been moving into becoming a multi-product. So from visual collaboration that is mainly used for team collaboration, brainstorming, bringing different teams together to plan and collaborate on ideas, to becoming the innovation workspace where you can solve different problems on the Miro board. So this is in a nutshell. I hope, Daniel, that's what you intended to hear.
Yeah, we wanted to hear the full story.
Yeah, I gave you.
I'd forgotten some of those details.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the story. Yeah.
I remember you said, I have to squeeze this in here. I remember you said that you have a lot of stories from your time in Russia. Is there is there one story that comes to mind that you can share in the podcast?
There's got to be a good one, Shlomit, because I am familiar with BRIC. That we don't use that acronym much. I worked at Goldman Sachs during the time when that acronym came about, so I'm very familiar with it. And Russia back then, it was a lot different than it is now. Well, some things are similar, some things are different. But I remember conversations at the firm, challenges, curveballs, just crazy stories that we would never hear in the US. So I'm curious about what stories, if any, you can share with us.
Well, there's been really so many stories. As I mentioned, it's been a very adventurous period, and one that I really enjoyed a lot. And I think I was mentioning about the traveling. I guess, one of this, I mean, it's just one out of many, many stories. Is when we used to have roadshows with the leadership of Alpha. So we used to go, the entire leadership team all together, not just the leadership, but also the extended, to different cities. And we used to spend one day in each city and then move into the next city. So it was literally, you come, you arrive sometimes in the evenings, sometimes in the mornings. You spend a full day with the team. You do presentations, and then you have conversations, and then you go to the branches and you meet sometimes with customers, definitely with employees, and then you move to the next city. So very intense, a lot of fun. And I remember that we arrived to a place in Siberia called Irkutsk, which is actually next to the Baikal. I think it's lake. Yeah, Lake Baikal, one of the most famous lakes in Russia. An amazingly beautiful place, I have to say. It's a magical place. It's one of the places that I really felt like, wow, like you can feel something very spiritual there. It's like amazingly beautiful. And we arrived at, I think it was like close to midnight. And the local team just put like this huge table with food, with Siberian dishes. And until then, I didn't know that there is specific food in Siberia. It's like, of course, I know
What is the typical food? I know this isn't a food podcast, but I'm just curious.
Yes,
What is the
I
typical
can
Siberian food?
tell you. Yeah, that was really fascinating. Frozen fishes, for example, like literally
Wow.
frozen fishes, frozen berries. So it's a
Huh.
lot of frozen things, which is quite interesting. I guess
Mm.
it is aligned with the weather, but things that I never tasted before. And it turned out that even in Moscow, you have only one restaurant, at least back then, maybe today more, but back then you had one restaurant that had Siberian food, Siberian dishes. So it's like I never experienced that before. But it's just like you had to, first of all, you had to eat, although it was like night. And also, of course, getting into the experience of a very, very unique food. And you just have to do it because this is part of being respectful to the local teams. So this is just one of many interesting experiences that I had. And we also spent, I remember the next day visiting the Baikal Lake and just like having just a nice lunch there and just walking around. It was like a day in between our roadshow. And until today, I mean, although it was probably 10 years ago, maybe longer, it's just one of the things that is so like as a memory and as I can even go back to the experience and the feelings of it. So yeah, but other than that, I had a lot of stories. I would also add, first time that I did a presentation in Russian, I just went on stage. I didn't speak that well Russian at that point. I mean, when I left Russia, I already spoke very well Russian. But first time that I had to do a presentation, my Russian was not great, and I still went for it. And I said, like, yeah, okay, they will understand. I hope at least half of what I'm trying to say. And I learned by that the best learning is by doing.
Yeah.
Just need to go for it. Yeah, just do it.
I love that. And I feel like that just applies to the HR profession. Like that, not only is that good life advice, but I feel like that's great advice for HR leaders. Like we are in an interesting time. One of the things that jumped out to me, as I mentioned earlier, we were primarily in the past, we've been a US kind of focused podcast. We've had European guests from the beginning, very early on, but it hasn't been, that was kind of luck than by intention. Now we're trying to be more intentional about it. And the interesting for me is how similar sometimes we think, we're in a bubble over here in the US and things are happening over here that are unique. But as I was kind of playing back the initial conversation we had with you, it became clear to me that there are a lot of similarities in the experiences that you've had over the last years, decade, that are seem very similar to the challenges that many HR leaders are facing here. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. There's what I hear in your story is risk taking, seeing opportunity when others may have been like, why would I go to Russia? Like this seems like a really poor choice, but you took that risk and it had a massive impact in your career and the experiences that you had and subsequently the jobs that you took on after that. And so what were some of the key learnings just in your style? I mean, those are very different companies, very
Yeah.
different industries, but there are common threads there. And I can you share with us, like from a personal growth perspective, like what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome navigating these different companies, these different industries, all of them growing extremely rapidly, the world also changing rapidly around you as you're having
Hmm.
these experiences? Like, how did that impact you and your development?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think first, experiences do shape us. So I am who I am thanks to all the experiences. And some of them are good, some of them are less good. So you are being shaped by everything. And of course, part of learning is also sometimes to fail when things are not working well. Or rather, I always prefer to phrase failure as learning, and very quickly to shift into, okay, what I'm actually learning here from this situation. Even if in the moment let's face it, nobody wants to be non-successful or to feel like things are not working out, but there is a lot of learning in that. So first, I've been learning a lot about myself, about what works, what doesn't work, about adaptability, about adjusting, about the fact that no experience is similar to the previous one. Of course, there are elements that are similar. We build muscles as leaders, we build muscles as individuals. And the more muscles you build, it's like going to the gym. You practice, you become stronger. Your muscle becomes stronger. So of course, life experiences or moving around, working in different industries or companies or context, it is helping for self-development and feeling more confident when you see similar situations, or even sometimes even harder situations, but you have the muscles. So it builds that resilience for sure in us. And at the same time, we have to accept that every situation is different. What I mean by that context is rapidly changing. When you move to a different organization, there is the language of this organization. So you need to understand the language of the organization. You need to learn the language of the organization. Sometimes you need to help shaping maybe a different language, or help to reframe or to think differently, or show people how they can think differently. But it's just, the point is that there is no copy paste. You always need to come to the situation, yes, with your muscles, but also be very, very open to, what does that mean? What's happening here? What are the ways of working? Why is it like that? And I think that has been a learning for me, is never to come with this like, oh, I know all the answers, been there, done that, but actually always come with this learner mindset, being an explorer rather than an expert.
Yeah, and there's something about business in Europe that I think makes it the learner, that whatever that trait is, or that skill set, agility, resilience, curiosity. It's particularly important in Europe because of the political and just the way the continent is structured here. It's the US. We are so focused on ourselves. And yes, a lot of things are derived here, and it is a huge center of business in the world, but it's not the only center of business. But because we kind of view it that way, I feel like in the US, an HR leader has that advantage of, you know what, I just need to worry about what's going on here, maybe new tech, maybe figure out AI. But in Europe, it's a lot more complicated, because I've got to imagine some of the things that were keeping you up at night in Russia, in the jobs that you had there, were very different to a multinational headquartered in Amsterdam that may have presence in Russia but has presence everywhere. And so it just feels different. And I don't know, I'm curious to get your take on that, if just part of the job is harder in Europe because of the way the world works there.
Yeah. I think about everything from a global perspective, because we have big operation in the US, right? Even today. And when I was with OLX, we operated in 30 markets. So we had emerging markets, we have more mature markets. We were operating in India, in Indonesia, in LATAM, also in the US, in South Africa. At Miro, we also operate across the globe. So I see that more as, and I think it's for every global organization or any global setup. It doesn't matter if you are located in Europe or you are located in the US. You have to first take the multicultural aspect into consideration, that people will be perceiving things in a different way. And I think many are familiar with the culture map book and some of the things or the principles that it talks about. I think it's absolutely correct from what I've seen. For example, how much communication needs to be clear, how much clarity is important, especially as organizations are growing and you have this multicultural dimension in it. So less is more in terms of explaining to people what actually that means, moving into very explicit communication. So there are some things which are just like, you need to know how to navigate when organization is becoming global. And even if I look at Miro, we have 75 nationalities. I mean, we are located in 12 countries in terms of where we are present, but we have 75 nationalities. At OLX, we had something like 90 nationalities. So we're operating in 30 markets and we had something like 90 nationalities. So it's like, how do you bring all of that together? Even in the Amsterdam office, we have people from all over the world. Even though it's in the Netherlands, I think like 70 or 80% are global people that are working here. So you have to be multicultural by default. And you need to be conscious to the fact that people perceive whatever happens in different ways. They perceive information in different ways, communication. There is high context, low context, culture. There is talking between the lines. There is being straightforward. I think, for example, in the US, the culture is more like you say things as they are, right? You're like, it's very straightforward. And then there are cultures where everything is between the lines. So you're like, okay, maybe people say one thing, but they think another thing. So this is where when you are bringing all these multicultural things and you need to navigate all of this, and you also need to be conscious to the fact that people are going to be sensitive about different things, you have to constantly navigate it and you have to be very much aware. And I think this is part of also the challenges that we see that HR leaders have today, people leaders have, is, for example, how do you react to global conflicts? People perceive global conflicts in different ways. People have sensitivities to what's happening out there. And that's another thing that you need to be very conscious about and be very clear as an organization. What do you react to? What you are not reacting to? What are the rules of the game? What is allowed to talk about in company forums, and where you draw the line in terms of it's not related to the business that we are doing. So
I think this all goes back to something that you said earlier. Muscle becomes stronger the more that you exercise them, and you feel more confident when you see similar or harder situations. And, because there's no copy and paste for every situation, when you have that muscle that you can flex, you can be adaptable. And I guess that leads me to something that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned on our prep call that over the last few years, you've gone through this sort of like personal transformation, this leadership transformation. Can you give us the backstory on that? Like, what triggered this journey that you've been on, and how's it been going?
By the way, I'm still in the journey.
Never ends.
Never ends. Exactly. So the journey is still ongoing, very much so. And I always say I'm work in progress. And that's how I feel about my journey, that I'm constantly evolving and learning from different experiences, learning about myself, seeking also more to understand, etc. And again, failing and then learning again. And in the past, and I think I mentioned the number of changes, and I'm sure that many people leaders will relate to it, the number of changes that we needed to navigate in the past years, which are like new situation. It's not even uncertainty. It's you need to navigate the unknown. You're going into a situation that never happened before, like literally. And suddenly you need to give answers to people. And we know that the workplace today, it's like people come with everything and they expect guidance. And that led me to this personal journey of happiness studies. So I started, I guess that would be 2.5 years ago, the happiness studies as part of the HSA, which is the Happiness Studies Academy, which is based on positive psychology. You can also call it well-being studies. That kind of led me to this entire world of of well-being, understanding better the topic. I remember when I went to the World Happiness Summit, I was incredibly surprised by how wide the topic is, because actually happiness or well-being, it brings so many different disciplines together: psychology, sociology, philosophy, spirituality, science. Like, it is like all the different places, or the different disciplines that actually come together when you talk about happiness. And how much unhappiness is also part of happiness, and the importance of what is called the minimal viable interventions. So the little things that we can do on a daily basis to become more resilient, to bounce back from difficulties faster. So what is called the anti-fragility. People like to say, what do you mean by anti-fragility? Well, anti-fragility is actually, it's resilience 2.0, is that you bounce, not only bouncing back from difficulties, you also become stronger as a result. What is also called in the positive psychology language, post-traumatic growth. So I just started this journey of studying this topic and applying this on myself with this, especially minimal viable intervention, which some of them, is like journaling, or going for a walk when is needed, or reframing situations, or the gratitude exercise, which I introduce with my team. So like really trying to focus on the little steps, or the little changes that can make a huge difference over time.
I love that. This is the first time I've heard minimal viable interventions, and
It's beautiful.
happiness. It is beautiful because happiness can be so fleeting, right? You can feel like everything, like we are good, like everything is fine right now. And all it takes is one email, one negative stimuli, and it's gone. And it's like, wait a second, what just happened here? And the notion that I can take a minimal viable intervention and get myself back on track is just a perfect way to describe it, because sometimes for me, it's just asking myself, like, okay, what's my role in this? Like, and it may be like, oh, well, I don't have a role in it. Like I have no involvement. So then it's like, oh, well, why am I attached so negatively to this response that I'm having? Like, what is going on here? And it's like, okay, maybe I need to take a walk. Maybe I'm hungry and I'm a faster, so I don't eat breakfast. And so when it comes around like 11,
That where's
11
that
a.m.,
hanger?
12
Yeah,
p.m., oh yeah,
grumpy. Yeah. Okay.
I get grumpy. And just the fact that knowing I can take some minimal viable interventions makes me a lot happier, and at least a lot more positive, a lot more positivity in my mindset.
One
Yeah,
thing that I
exactly.
think that Stephen, you might have, I think you shared this with me. You definitely did multiple times. The idea of having a core negative image. And so
Yes.
like whenever you're interacting with somebody, and if you have like this CNI of them, whatever it is, and we have it with everybody, our parents, our partners, our friends, our coworkers, how if once we like apply that CNI to every interaction we have with them, it like automatically starts it like as a negative interaction. And so one thing you said was, one of your minimal viable interventions was reframing situations. And so I'm curious, like, how do you, like, what have been, like, what's a common, like, situation that you'd be in before that would just like trigger like this fight or flight response, or like a knee jerk reaction? Like, what are some of those situations that you've been reframing?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And just before answering it, I was just thinking in what way this is also helpful in current times, like for me as a leader and as a person, is that I think that we are overall today in negative capacity as leaders, because there's so much to navigate, so much change. We talked about it in the beginning. We have to switch context all the time. So what I found these things are very helpful is exactly with the self-reflection, awareness, understanding the triggers, and also allowing emotions. And I think, Stephen, you talked about it, like we have different emotions that come in from little things that can trigger that, like the smallest, I don't know, interaction or email or comment. And it's about, okay, allowing the emotion to happen and be more curious about the emotion, like be more curious about what is actually telling me, because the emotions are, it's data, and it's very useful data that we can also use in order to understand better ourselves and our triggers and be self-aware. Situation to reframe. I think, it's starting from little things that can happen at work, that sometimes, somebody throws a comment or there is a difficult conversation. So again, for me, a reframing, and I'm really trying to be very disciplined in doing that, although it's difficult, is asking myself, like, first, if I felt bad after that, like, why? What is the learning for me in this situation? That's already reframing, because you're turning your mind from just seeing the negative to immediately also see the positive around it. And by the way, we as humans, we are wired always to see the negative. That's human nature. So we pay much more attention to what is not working well than what is working well. So this is where I'm being very, very conscious, but also in conversations sometimes with my team is like, I know it's difficult. I know it's like, it's crap, it's hard, whatever. But can we also see what is actually working well? What have we actually achieved? The gratitude exercise, that's also reframing. So reframing every situation as what is it is here to teach me? What am I learning from it? How can I do it better? What this emotion is telling me? What is the data here that I should be paying attention to? So this is an exercise that I'm trying to use in smaller situations to bigger situations, but these situations happen all the time, every day.
Well, let me give you a situation or just a hot topic. And I think this is something you'd probably enjoy talking about, but AI. I feel like there's a negative view that people could have about all of the changes that have happened over the last couple of years. I mean, OpenAI just released a new model, I think like yesterday or like the day before. It's like it never stops. I mean,
Never
same with
stop.
Anthropic. I think
Hmm.
Claude just had a big update like a week ago. It's like every week there's something new. And I heard something recently. It was like, I mean, like the negative view is all of our brains are going to rot. We're going to end up working for AI. And then there's the positive view, which is you can embrace the human capabilities and you can have AI work for you. And so that's like a slight reframe. And I'm curious, like, how do you think about something like AI? And
Yeah.
how do you talk about it with your team so that there's like a positive spin on it? From siloed systems to onboarding chaos, HR leaders dropped their biggest tech nightmares in our first ever live webinar with Ian from ChartHop the other day. It was awesome. And, the verdict coming out of the webinar, disconnected data and rigid tools are holding HR teams back. But there is some good news. ChartHop is truly built for the HR builders. So if you're wanting to do things like automate onboarding workflows, connect HR and business data, creating a true single source of truth, like no more fragmented systems, and you just want to nerd out with a flexible solution, then ChartHop is for you. We saw the platform in action on the webinar, and it is legit. It's really built for the designers and the builders out there in HR. So if that's you and you want to learn more, go to their website, request a demo, and just let them know that we sent you.
Yeah. Since I'm an optimist by nature, I'm very optimistic about AI. First, I see in what way it's actually shaping or changing our work on a daily basis. We are using AI capabilities, starting from an AI coach for managers to synthesizing data, helping Mironeers to find information in a more simple way. We are using AI capabilities on the Miro board. So it helps us also to synthesize what is actually on the board when we do collaboration. And we have also a very ambitious agentic agenda. This is kind of from a work perspective. On a personal level, I'm also a user of AI, leveraging this a lot. So of course I can see the aspect of self-development. What's going to happen to self-development? Because if I think about the past, you had to go through difficulties to produce something, like writing a book or summarizing or doing a research. You actually had to think to get the data or to pull something, get a product out. Now you just need to ask ChatGPT, right? Or AI agent or whatever, and you get the answer. So you don't go through this process of learning and searching and putting the work. You get the answer very easily. So I can see that aspect, and I am to some degree concerned about self-development and what's going to happen to self-development. At the same time, I think work is going to change. So that's the optimist in me, and just saying that, okay, a lot of things AI will solve for us, but there is a huge opportunity. There is a space that AI for now cannot solve for us, and this is the human interaction, the human relationship, the human skills, which makes such a huge difference in how you shape relationships, how you build products. And that's where actually we have an opportunity, which we didn't have before.
Have y'all heard of something called copy work? So it's like this idea that a lot of like some of the best advertisers back in the day would get really good at copywriting. They would find ad copy that they admired, and every day they would just transcribe it. So they would have like one set of copy on the left, and then they're just like copying it down, and then they're sort of like annotating like or jotting down like why those ads worked really well. And so that's sort of how I think about self development with AI. Even if like we're getting the output much faster, I find that like through the pattern recognition and like doing things way more than I would have in the past. Like simple example, let's say I have to write an article. That would take me 10, 15, 20 hours to write that one article. And through that like pain, I think I would get better at writing, but it would just take way longer. Today, I could write that article in 15, 20 minutes as long as I give it the right inputs, like the raw data. And I think through that pattern recognition of getting more out, your brain starts to like recognize like what good writing looks like. And so now if I have to write something on my own, it's much faster because I already kind of like have that formula in my head. And so that's always my argument now when people say that like our brains are going to rot, we're not going to learn. I think like we just have like the best self development tools at our disposal anytime. And sorry,
Yeah.
Stephen, I think you're going to say something.
I was just going to ask, and I agree with you, Daniel. I have gotten better at copywriting, period, because of generative AI. And yes, generative AI now does 80% of the work that I had to do. But because I'm not worrying about the structure. What is an optimal structure? Do I put this paragraph here? Do I put it over there? I'm actually focusing on the narrative. Like, what is the story that I'm trying to tell here? And so I'm getting a lot better at articulating and telling the story and the details. And it's like if I can imagine what it must feel like being an expert copywriter, like those are the most important things. And those are the things that people get wrong. But here I am, I'm skipping 80% of the stuff that I know I'm not great at. It's going to take me a long time, but I am getting better. And it's a weird thing to explain to people that don't use Gen I. And I can understand the hesitation and your minds are going to rot. But I also remember, like, because I'm older, I'm 48. I remember being in school and the teachers, like the new cool calculators with all the formulas, I forget what they're called. You need them for like the upper algebras. And they wouldn't let us use them.
TI-83, I think.
Yeah, the TI-83. And they wouldn't let us use them because they were like, oh, no. You won't be able to do math if we let you cheat with this technology. But here we are all these years later, and math is happening. I can still do basic math, the math that I would have done anyway. And so I'm curious, Shlomit, how, as the HR leader, how do you look at the use of AI, just general, for your team, for the company, just employees using this technology? Because I believe there is a big divide at the company. And I'm being general here. I'm not talking about Miro. I believe that there are large groups of employees that are not using Gen AI at all. and they're not really curious to use it. And then you have another group, whether covert or overt, they are using it.
They're
and
generating code, like probably not allowed to generate code in tools like ChatGPT, but they are.
Yeah. Or they're like using their personal GPT. Hey, give me a quick answer to this. How would I respond to that? And so I believe the HR leader needs to be a spokesperson for be a voice for the people on how we should be using these technologies. And do you agree with that? And if so, like, as an HR leader who may or may not even use ChatGPT or generative AI on a regular basis, how then do I begin to form my own opinions about what is right, what is wrong, how should we be doing this? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are there and what experience you may have.
So first, I don't think there is right or wrong. I think that first, absolutely answering to your question, we should be promoting AI. We are promoting AI. And I believe that the role of the people leader is definitely not to ignore, but also to be almost like a promoter or a spokesperson for AI, because that's reality. So first of all, reality. It's happening. It's here. It's shaping the way we are doing things. It's shaping the future of work or the now of work. So it's not something that you can ignore. I mean, in fact, when you look today, all the solutions are embedding AI to some degree. So of course, you have AI first solutions. I remember, those years where you had like digital first solutions or companies that were doing embedding digital. We have the same now with AI. You have AI first solutions, the solutions that were built with AI capabilities at the core. And then you have solutions that didn't start as AI, but are embedding AI or specifically Gen AI solutions in it or agents or whatever. So it is absolutely a reality. So I can't imagine a world where you don't use AI. So this is first thing. The second is I'm really seeing, and we are seeing the benefits of leveraging AI. It improves the work. It helps us optimize. It helps us synthesize. It helps to find information very quickly. It helps to provide advice to people. I mean, I'm just thinking like 5 years ago, if you had a question, you had to go to a person or write to a person. I don't know, or even open a ticket, even if it's not open a ticket, but like you had a human that had to give you the answer. Today, a lot of the questions can be answered by an agent. And we have questions all day long, right? As employees, as managers, we have problems, we need to solve things. How great it is when you can just go to an agent and get an answer, because 90% of the questions are standard questions. And then you get to a human when there is really this value add where the human interaction is needed. But a lot of the things AI can solve for us. So this is great. And then obviously it can help us summarize, in a way that was never done before, and be a thought partner and create content. And we are in the content management era. I think it's like we are moving from knowledge management to content management, and there's so much content in every organization, and AI can help us organize the content and eliminate content. So there's so much opportunity in that I'm seeing every day, that I'm like, why wouldn't we leverage it? So again, it's maybe I'm coming to it more from an optimistic point of view, but I think it's exactly like the Industrial Revolution, but that took 200 years. The AI revolution that we are living at is just shaping and changing the work, and jobs are going to be different. It's just going to happen much faster, but it happened already in history. Just now the speed of things is different. So jobs are going to change, and that's a great opportunity for human development. That's how I see it now. It's like we have a huge opportunity in front of us to do meaningful work or shaping the work differently than what we had even a year ago.
I love that. And my last question, because I love this topic, and I'm glad this has really been one big riff. Daniel and I always joke, we have outlines for these conversations, and usually early days we would stick to it like 90%, and these days it's usually more like 60%. Like this conversation has been like 10% because it's just been such an organic conversation, which is great. And one of the observations that we're making is it doesn't feel like the workforce is preparing itself for this particular transformation and this AI, this shift from knowledge management to content management and everything that AI is, all the implications that AI has on work. Do you feel the same? Is it the same? Do you feel the same way that our workers, employees are not keeping up? And what's the perspective from a Europe standpoint? Like if you were to guess, like what percentage of the workforce are using these tools? I'm just curious to get your perspective because we don't have conversations like this very often.
Okay, great. So I can also share that at Miro, maybe just from our experience, in the past year, we've done a lot to promote the topic to Mironeers, starting from learning content to an AI conference where we brought a lot of content promoting the capabilities of AI, and we continue doing it. So really making sure that people do educate themselves and get the opportunities to educate themselves, beside the fact that we're just leveraging AI in almost everything that we do. So first, there is a need to educate and be very proactive in promoting the topic, because there is indeed a lot of fear around it. And I understand that I work for an organization that maybe is more open to it just naturally because we are in this space. But there are many organizations out there where people like, why do I need to do it? So there is a need to educate and show people in what ways it can actually improve their day to day. And I think, again, I'm not thinking about it from a European point of view. I'm thinking about it more from a global point of view. It's actually quite interesting to see that, especially when you're at the global level, that sometimes growth markets or emerging markets, they are much early adopters of technology than more mature markets. That's one thing that I found, that sometimes you go with something new in a more emerging market and it's like immediately people jump on it because they don't have a lot of legacy. They're just like, they do like huge steps. This is what I felt also when I worked in Russia, that from a digital point of view, even like 10 years ago, it was very advanced. We, like when I worked for Alpha, we used to have the best app and the best internet banking, which like, and I'm going to the US or the UK and other markets, it was like uncomparable. It's like, and when I moved to the Netherlands, I was at start, I was a little bit like, I had a cultural shock because I got used to such a rapid digital services, and here, it's a little bit different. There is still way to grow. So I think, it's actually quite interesting how people also multiculturally adapt those things. But I think the bottom line is that it is here, it is reality, it is changing very quickly. And I think we as people leaders, we need to be ahead of it and really not only join forces with this transformation, but promote learning and development people and kind of remove the fear. It's like, that's okay, launch fast and iterate, try, experiment with it, see the value, and build on that.
I forget who it was that we had on on the show, but I think the way she put it was, we have to normalize failure when it comes to AI. Like, it's not going to be perfect.
Totally.
It may not even be right. And so we got to be okay that we're going to fail a little bit, but we're ultimately going to get to something better. So I love that.
Oh yeah. And that goes to, like, we talked a little bit before about these muscles and skills. I mean, it's all linked to it. It all comes to character skills, resilience, agility, flexibility. How do we look at failure? How do we approach learning? And actually, I think there is also a lot of research already that is showing that the people who adopt AI better are the people with high level of optimism and agency. And I think these are the two things to keep in mind. And optimism is very much linked also to resilience. So everything is, in that sense, it's interconnected. So yeah,
it's all connected.
It's all connected. Launch fast and iterate. Yes.
Well, we promised that we wouldn't keep you for too long, and I think it's like what, six
I didn't even
for you.
notice how fast the time has passed. To be honest,
it went by really fast. And so we have two more traditions. The first is rapid fire questions. It's the same set of questions that we ask every guest, and there are four of them. and we try to go as quickly as possible. So we'll try to get you out of here soon. Question 1. What's one piece of advice that you'd give someone starting in HR today?
Be as open-minded as you can.
Love that.
Or just be open-minded, full stop.
Be open-minded. Next question. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be? So what would your superpower nickname be from your team?
Forever optimist.
Yes.
If you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be?
Oh, one strategy. The ability to build real human connections. Is that a strategy?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Like if there was a company out there that is just like best in building these personal human connections, I would steal their recipe for sure.
We know a couple that are doing some really amazing things, so we could connect you if you're interested.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Next question, and I'm excited because again, I mentioned earlier, it's a goal of ours. Who do we need to have on the show next? So if you were to think about someone in our profession, they don't have to be in Europe, but that would be a nice bonus, that is just doing such cool things, such, great work that really deserves to have a light kind of shined on them. Who would that be? Who do we need to give a platform to?
Okay, so I would have to recommend my great friend, Guillermo Miranda.
We would be honored. Guillermo is what you
said? Guillermo Miranda. Yes, he lives in Madrid, although he lived many years also in the States. He was IBM Chief Learning Officer, at some point also Boeing Chief Learning Officer, and done many different things and advising different companies, and also very passionate about the AI space, and is someone that I just like very much as a person and as a leader.
We'll have to reach out to him. All right, so final tradition on the show, one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or phrase from the episode that we want to close with, and it could be whatever comes to your mind.
Personal transformation. These are 2 words.
That's okay. It could be a phrase. I'm going to go with the phrase as well. I'm going to say, get in the gym and build those muscles.
It's part of personal transformation.
Right?
Yeah. And then I'm going to go. Yeah. I'm going to go with one word that is hopefully the output of your 2, what you guys shared, and that's happiness. We haven't had happiness. To me, that's the theme of this conversation, is happiness. And it's been a long time and since we've had an episode that was centered around happiness, and it's just so important. And so many people don't have it, and I think we all deserve it. And I am certainly happy after having shared the last hour with you, Shlomit. Thank you so much. It is so refreshing to have someone on the show with clear views and beliefs, vulnerable to share those with us. And so we are grateful for you and for this conversation. So thank you for
very much
being part of our community now.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.